All right. Hey, y'all. Welcome back. This is Trey, TreyMixes.com. And we're about to wrap up our series of mixing from scratch and do some insanely basic mastering. And though I do mastering, this tutorial is going to be insanely simple, really short way of just demonstrating to you guys some steps you may want to take if you're mastering your own music, you're mastering your own mix. I would, on a professional level, if you're doing the mixing and can afford to either have the client or yourself sent to a mastering engineer separately who have fresh ears and a really correct room and mastering equipment, and to really get the job done super professionally, I would recommend doing that. Or if someone else is doing the mixing and you're good at mastering, recommending to your client, hey, your mixing will be good, but you should have a mastering engineer check it with a separate set of ears and do a separate mastering job if you're a happy client with a happy, good mix. So with that being said, though, a lot of guys who may watch this will be doing it themselves, and I want you guys to be able to do this quickly and successfully on your own without bogging yourself down, worrying too much about the extra mastering phase just to get your music to where you are happy with it to release it. So this will be the end of this series. Thank you guys for hanging out and sticking around, and let's get right into it. So we have this print that I bounced down of our song City Escape. All right, pretty good mix. And what we're going to do is I've pulled in a similar sounding, similar groove track, and we're going to compare the two. And obviously, hopefully you could see that one is very louder. So check this out. Plug your ears if needed. All right. But we have this as a reference to see kind of what other mastered mixes are like. So obviously there's a huge volume difference. So we're going to pull this guy way on back, see if we can match our volume so we can actually compare what we may need to do. Okay, we're really averaging around -7 on that mix, which is fine. So let's get this volume at this loud portion to similar output level. I've always been with you here and now. Give all that. Again, we want it just close enough to where we can kind of compare our EQs and our sounds to see from this professional release what we may need to change. Just like we were using references in the mixing portion, but now with fewer things to look at, we're just going to look at one mix versus the next mix. Okay, this other mix has a little bit more warmth to it and has a little bit more shimmer. So let's, on our first go around here, let's put an EQ on, and tell you what, let's do a linear phase EQ. You'll have less phase issues. This is more appropriate for mastering. Same idea, same principle, it just creates less phase problems in your mix as you start moving all your EQs around. So let's work on this and see what we said with a little bit more warmth, which will be maybe some low mids that we added back on our mix, but maybe we see kind of how we compare, and maybe remove a little harshness if we think the vocals are too harsh, and maybe a little bit more shimmer on the top end. Okay, it does seem a little hollow still, but we got a little bit more shimmer on the top. And this is going to be subtle. These are subtle EQ moves. We're affecting the entire mix. So this may not seem like much. You may have to listen on some high-quality headphones or speaker monitors. But as we do this, the overall number of subtle, small moves that we make in this will make a big difference in the overall big picture. No time for guessing, follow my plan instead. Find that next stage no matter just kind of brightens it up, adds a little bit more air. So let's see if we can find a good place to add a little bit more of that warmth back and see kind of what we like.
Don't care what lies ahead. No time for guessing, follow my plan instead. Find the next stage no matter.
Okay, that's more kind of where the lowness of the guitars and the bass are kind of wanting to poke through. So let's see if adding just a little bit more back there will help us. Let's start with 1 decibel.
Don't care what lies ahead. No time for guessing, follow my plan instead. Find the next stage no matter what that may be. Take my lead, I'll set you free. Follow me, set me free. Trust me and we will.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. Let's do some more comparing.
Don't care what bad, come on and lay it down. Find the next always been with you here and my need, I'll set you.
If you listen closely to the low end of the guitars and the bass in both mixes, you can kind of hear where they sit in both mixes, and that this brings them out a little bit more. So we'll check this out.
Much so bad, come on and lay it down. Find the next stage no matter what that may be. And now, follow me, set me free. Trust me and we will escape from the city.
It just helps the bass become a little bit more prominent. But I am noticing that the vocals get a little harsh. So let's roll up here and see if we can spot where they're getting harsh.
Don't care what lies ahead. No time for guessing, follow my plan instead. Find the next stage no matter what that may be. Take my lead, I'll set you.
Also makes the snare a little heavy on the ears. So let's do barely a decibel here, see if this makes a difference for our total mix.
Don't care what lies ahead. No time for guessing, follow my plan instead. Find the next stage no matter what that may be. Take my lead, I'll set you free. Follow me, set me free.
Alright, we'll check it with and without.
Don't care what lies ahead. No time for guessing, follow my plan instead. Find the next stage no matter what that may be. Take my lead, I'll set you free. Follow me, set me free. Trust me and we will escape from the city. I'll make it through. Follow me, set me free. Trust.
Yes, I think that does what we're looking for. Just a little bit warmer of a mix and a little bit more high-end shimmer. And we can see we're pretty consistent on our dynamics in a song like this. We may want to add a tiny bit of compression. You may not, since we are already having bus compression and the thing's pretty compressed. But a little bit of compression can go a long way. Let's go back to our favorite free bus compressor. And let's just try one of these default. We'll go with punchy and see if this will take our threshold, and we'll just run these settings and see if a little bit of compression helps tighten up these dynamics just a smidge before we go into the mastering phase, so we can maybe help ourselves get a little bit louder.
Don't care what lies ahead. No time for guessing, follow my plan instead. Find the next stage no matter what that may be. Take my lead, I'll set you free. Follow me, set me free. Trust me.
Okay, we changed our output to have no change in output. Let's pull it back down, and I'm only doing about a decibel, sometimes a decibel and a half reduction. It just so happens to be that's what this makeup gain is, so I don't have to change it. But usually I only want the compressor to just tap down the parts that are jumping out. So I think we're succeeding here, and you can hear the change in punchiness in, say, the kick drum. So listen to the kick here, and then I'll turn it on.
Don't care what lies ahead. No time for guessing, follow my plan instead. Find the next stage no matter what that may be. Take my lead, I'll set you free. Follow me.
It just makes the drums more percussive, and adds a little bit of weight to it and glues it together a little bit better. So that's good, just a tiny bit of compression. And then we will use a default limiter. And we'll talk about a couple of things for loudness here. And let me pull my loudness meter up. There's a few things. If you're printing this to CD, you can get away with it being a little bit louder than you can with streaming. With streaming, there's a standard LUFS of a -14 that Spotify, iTunes, and some other places all kind of adhere to the same thing. And if you overcrush your mix and it's way louder than the -14, it doesn't matter to them. They're going to turn it down to that volume level for you or raise it there. So you want to have a good loudness to it, but you don't want to overdo it for the sake of loudness, because if you're just streaming this stuff, it's going to not make a big difference, and it will only sound like an overcrushed or an uncompressed mix, unlimited mix. So get a good limit. Don't worry about the loudness. But if you're doing CD work and you're printing, you will probably want to really challenge the loudness of other major releases. But if you're releasing, but we're going to do this like we're releasing to MP3 and sending out to these streaming things. So when they convert your file, your wave, they're going to convert it to an MP3, and some of that compression on the MP3 file can add artifacts and noise and such to your track. And if you are pushing it too close to the zero ceiling, then you're going to get all kinds of weird stuff going on. So you want to try based on recommendations from other mastering engineers, set your output at -1 decibels. So when it converts, you won't run the risk of those things getting into your track. You can look up a lot more information about that than what I just gave you on the internet. I suggest you look at many articles about that. But we're going to leave ours at -1. And then we can just bring up the gain, and this will show us how much limiting is going on. There are lots of great limiters out there. We're just sticking with our rule about using free and default plugins.
Don't care what lies ahead. No time for guessing, follow my plan instead. Find the next stage, no matter what that may be. Take my lead, I'll set you free. Follow me, set me free. Trust me and we will escape from the city. I'll make it through. Follow me, set me free. Trust me and we will escape from the city.
Okay, so what I did there was bring it up, and we're getting this much compression on the peaks. And you can see here our integrated loudness is, for at least that portion of the song, is louder than the -14. But again, they'll turn it down. Listen to the mix and try to tell if you're over compressing or ruining your mix by trying to get it super loud. So we'll try again.
Find out, must keep on moving ahead. No time for guessing, follow my plan instead.
Okay, it sounds like a great level, and we're not getting tons and tons of reduction, and we are fitting into some short-term loudness up at 9 and 10. That's perfectly fine. We're not being over loud at that level. But now I want to demonstrate, if you overdo this, what kind of distortion and problems you're going to get in your mix. So heads up, this might get really loud, but I want to demonstrate a point that just seeking loudness is not necessarily what you want, and running your limiters through the ceiling is not what you want either.
Trusting in what you can't see. Take my lead, I'll set you free.
So it's loud, and that's great, but you can listen to the kick, the snare, and the vocals, and listen to all this undue distortion that is coming in when you're over limiting this.
Trusting in what you can't see. Take my
It's really crushing and crunching and taking some of the dynamics out of that. The kick is really loud, and that's fun, but it's not presenting any dynamics to the mix. It's really crushing all the feeling out of it and adding too much undue distortion. So let's go back to about where we were, listen for a little while, and then we'll compare it with the loudness of our reference.
my lead, I'll set you free. Follow me, set me free. Trust me and we will escape from the city. I'll make it
Okay. Again, a little high for streaming, but they're going to pull it down. But you just don't want to overdo it and overcrush your mix to where you're unhappy with the sound. So let's compare that with our friend over here, who has no processing on him whatsoever. But we'll roll him up to his default output and see where he's coming out at.
Give all that's within you.
Okay, you can note here this is really, really loud, and you can also hear that it is really crushing. So you look, there's like very little dynamic range happening here in the chorus. Very little. It's just not sausage, and it is crushing vocals, crushing the snare. I'm not really sure that I even like that in this sound. So let's pull this back to the -1 output, see where we're at, and compare the two.
Give all that's within you. Be me from the city. I'll make it through. Follow, follow me. Set me free. Trust me and we will escape from the city. I'll make. Here we go again. Machine. I'll save you. And I'll be your downfall.
Okay, that's a little bit closer to that 8 and 9 range, and I think this song's still at 10.
Trust me and we will escape from the city. I'll make it through, prove it to you.
Now, I'm not saying that I'm a better mixer than anybody by any means, but I like that where we're limiting this and knowing that they will adjust for volume on streaming services. I like the dynamics and the punch that this mix is getting compared to the over crushing that's happening here. It's just too loud. Master this to taste, and if you're out there streaming it, then you've got yourself a streamable song that you can be happy with, that is going to be competitive on streaming services because they're going to change the master anyway. So let's print this fellow and we'll bounce it in place, and then this way you can see, I want you to see that it's going to change the sound wave, the visual of it. Then that way you'll be able to tell comparatively just looking at the others. Now, while that is no indication of loudness or indication of dynamic range in and of itself, just looking at it, you can kind of try to gauge whether or not you are at a similarly competitive volume. So see, we're slamming into the ceiling here. We're clipping. These are mostly kicks and snares. And you can see comparatively we have a much longer range that we can go to before we're crushing it to this degree. But also knowing that this is of a good non-overcrushed mix.
I'll make it through. Follow, follow me. Set me free. I'll make it through, prove it to you. Ashamed of being. Oh yeah, no, I don't care. Oh, bad, come on and lay it down. For guessing, follow my plan.
See, fairly consistent outputs there. So that is how you can use a little EQ, a little compression, and a default stock limiter to change your EQ shape how you want to kind of match a reference. Do a little bit of compression just to tighten it up and give it a little bit more smack, and then raising the volume to a competitive level. And some of that will take trial and error, reading your meters. But once you put it out to a streaming service, they're going to adjust. So try your best not to over limit, but you definitely want to get it close and competitive. A little trial and error will help. But I think in this case, they did a pretty good job. So I'm going to ship this mix off. Thank you very much for hanging out through this whole series. If you've watched all the episodes, please leave comments telling me where you found something useful or something helpful. If you want to see another series or another set of videos, then leave comments telling me. Head over to TreyMixes.com, sign up to get your free saturation book. And you can also come hang out with me on Instagram at TreyMixes1. Just putting up pictures, sharing some videos, having conversations. Anyway, thank you very much. Y'all have a wonderful day.